Kia ora koutou katoa.
We're frozen.
Oh, she's frozen already. All right, she's back. Thanks, Mel.
So sorry. We may have some technical difficulties. So thank you for joining our world-class New Zealand speaker series with Tim Alpe. My name is Mel, Kia's Global Director of Partnerships and Engagement, and as part of my role, I have the absolute pleasure of looking after our world-class New Zealand community and hosting these events. For those who aren't aware, Kia was founded over 20 years ago by Sir Stephen Tyndall and Professor David Teese, who understood that our offshore Kiwi are crucial to keeping New Zealand connected to the world. Since then, we've continued to nurture and grow this community and now have almost 500,000 Kiwis across 185 different countries. A vital part of this community is our world-class New Zealand network, a unique group of individuals involved in world-leading and inspiring work that creates positive change. They are passionate advocates for Aotearoa and actively give back to our people and businesses. So this series was created to not only highlight the incredible stories of these individuals, but to inspire others to push the boundaries of their own business goals and expectations. We are hugely appreciative of our world-class New Zealanders who always make time to connect, share their insights, experiences, and personal networks to help others achieve the same success. And I know there are several world-class New Zealanders on this call today, so I'd like to acknowledge you all and say a big thank you for all your continued support of Kia. Finally, a bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions for Tim during the session, just use the Q&A section at the bottom of the screens and we'll leave some time at the end for questions. So to welcome our speaker today, Tim Alpe. Tim co-founded Jucy with his brother Dan in 2002, and the business quickly grew and led to several new concepts, including Jucy Snooze and Jucy Cruise. However, from the highest of highs came the lowest of lows when the pandemic decimated 2 decades of work almost overnight. So today we're here to chat with Tim about the Jucy journey, the highs, the lows, and the importance of mental health. We'll also discuss the future of tourism for Aotearoa and a topic close to Tim's heart, giving back, whether it's supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs or his most recent venture helping local community and underprivileged kids. Thank you so much for joining us, Tim. I've got a couple of questions here. So to kick things off, it seems the tourism industry is something you've grown up with, starting with your dad who launched Maui Campers in the 80s. Can you tell us a bit about the industry and what it is about it that captivated you?
Yeah, it actually goes back a little bit earlier than that. My grandfather had travel agency stores called Out Travel on the North Shore in Auckland here. So to say it's sort of in the DNA and the blood would probably be an understatement. But I think, so we were probably destined from the start. My poor mother, we sit around the kitchen table at dinner every night and all we spoke about was tourism. So we were pretty much buggered from the start. That was kind of where we were going to end up. That was kind of always sort of the plan. I think what I really loved about it was being in New Zealand. We were able to see just incredible this country was and just how much we had to offer, and tourism being such a big part of that. I think it was always sort of in the fact that we really wanted to grow a business which really encouraged and showed people everything that you could do in New Zealand. So I think it was one of those things that my mother's side of the family came from a farming side of the family. So I suppose we ticked the box from a farming agricultural side, and my father's side came from the tourism. So I'm not a farmer, but I'm pretty involved in tourism.
And so from that background, you launched Jucy and Jucy Snooze and other futuristic ideas for New Zealand, such as, yes, Jucy Snooze, the hotels, City Hop. So how did these new concepts, how were they received when you first brought them to New Zealand?
Yeah, I think I'm probably your quintessential entrepreneur to a certain degree, and continuously looking at new opportunities. And one of the luckiest things I had with my role and with Jucy was I travelled a lot. When you could travel, yeah. I was constantly overseas. We're up in Europe 3 times a year because most of our customers came from that part of the world. So whilst you travel, you get to see a lot of other things around the world, and you got to pick up a lot of ideas. And I think our mantra really was always asking ourselves, how much better could it be? And not necessarily reinventing the wheel as such, but just saying, well, how can we make the experience a whole bunch greater? And probably putting the customer at the forefront of that decision making. So any sort of innovation. And I mean, City Hop was a really good example of that. City Hop is New Zealand's first and only car share program, which we launched probably over 10 years ago now. So it's, and we saw the concept in Europe where you didn't actually have to own a car, you could share cars with other people, and we had the technology and we launched it. Fair to say we were probably a little bit before our time. But again, City Hop's going today, it's owned by Toyota, and it's growing from strength to strength. So again, trying to take what works overseas and bring it back in. I think we did the same thing with the snooze product, which was looking at the accommodation sector and the backpacker hostel sector and saying it was actually, hostels were a bit of a dirty word. The product was very antiquated. There hadn't been a lot of innovation gone into the sector. So we looked at it and turned it on its head and created these incredible sleeping pods and capsules and took the concept kind of out of Asia, brought it to New Zealand, and very shortly we'll bring it to Australia as well. So it's kind of I think it's really looking at opportunities that come out, not necessarily by design, but probably by the fact that we see an opportunity, we see something which is being done really well offshore and thinking, God, could we take that to New Zealand, or vice versa, something like what we have with a camper van product here in New Zealand, saying, does that work, in Australia as well?
Awesome. So just obviously touching on Jucy and the journey you've had to date, obviously, as you mentioned, travel is kind of off the cards for a lot of Kiwis at the moment. So over the last 2 years, obviously your business was hugely affected by COVID and the pandemic. So what has this actually meant for the organisation, and how have you adjusted to the future to ensure the future of your company?
Yeah, it was, as I sort of mentioned to you before, I spent a lot of time up in Europe, and I was there in January, February of 2019, just before 2020, maybe, I can't remember now, just before COVID hit in New Zealand. And I remember being up there, and it became a bit weird. You go to meetings with people and they wouldn't shake your hand, and you have to wear this mask, and it all became a bit strange. We hadn't really seen it down here in New Zealand. And then I got back, and within sort of 3 weeks later, the borders closed, and basically 90% of our business stopped. So 90% of our revenue stopped, and we had a lot of forward book. A lot of our customers, especially in our camper van rental side of the business, booked well in advance. So they would book, a lot of Europeans would book now for travel in October, November. So we had a lot of forward book, a lot of deposits, and our revenue stopped. And, we sort of 90% of the revenue stopped overnight. And unfortunately, we had, a significant business. We had close to probably 350 staff. It was a big business operating out of head office in New Zealand. So it became pretty clear to us that we needed to go out there and raise capital. We had a supporting bank along the way, but they kind of said to us, look, we like you, but to continue to support you past. And there was a big issue around no one really knew what was going to happen. No one really knew whether this was a 2-month, 3-month, 6-month, or as it turns out, over 2-year process. So we had to raise capital, and so we went out there, and obviously raising capital in the world's worst environment was devastating in the sense that we had a good amount of interest, but it was very probably predatory interest, more so because we were sort of on our knees scenario, and eventually we had to eventually sell the business, and the business got sort of broken up. We had 3 divisions, as you mentioned before. We had our rental side, we had our snooze accommodation side, and we had our cruise side. And about just before COVID, we actually sold 50% of our snooze business to a public company out of Australia called Event, who are well known for movie cinemas and hotels. They've got the QT, the Ridges Hotel brand. So we sold 50% to them. And then when the new sort of majority owner came into Jucy, the Jucy group as such, we decided, when they broke the business up, I had to make the really tough decision that, if it was going to be broken up that way, that I probably wasn't the right person to continue on with that, which was, when you spend 20 years of your life building something up, it was absolutely devastating to, in a sense, walk away from it. But for me, it was the right decision. My brother Dan continued on with the rental side of the business, and that was great for him, and I think it was really good for us as founders of the business that he was still there. And then so that all happened in whenever it was last year. I can't remember what year it is now. But it was pretty devastating, but it was just what you had to do to basically survive.
So obviously a super challenging time. What lessons do you think you and those in the tourism industry would take from this experience? Like, what are your like lessons learned? What are your kind of guiding lights for people trying to see, the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question. It's a very hard. I mean, I went back and looked at our, we had a pretty organized risk registry back in the day, and I went through all the risks. We had terrorism, we had exchange rates, we had all these different things down there. We just never had global pandemic where you'd see, your business basically close overnight. So I think, it's very hard to prepare for these sort of things. I think going forward, that'll be one aspect where people will actually think, shit, could this happen again? I think some of the advice that I will probably give is, what I think we did well in the sense when the shit hit the fan and everything went south, I think we were very, we kept our team very involved. We had to make some really big decisions. We had to get rid of a majority of our crew on Zoom. We couldn't go into the offices, we couldn't meet with them, but we were very transparent with them, and we're a big family, and so we basically were very, there was no bullshit around it. It was very straight. Everyone knew what was going on. I think that was, whilst it was really hard, it was actually really good. And I think what was interesting was when we got out of the first lockdown, we kind of got everyone back together again for a sort of, farewell drink as such that we couldn't do when we were in lockdown. And what was really interesting was just that, to see how well everyone had sort of got on with things. It was devastating, but some people were doing studying, some people had gone into other roles, some people had done other things, and I think it was quite cathartic from our perspective to understand that our people were actually they were going to be all right, and actually more so, they were more concerned about how Dan and I were going. So I think the advice that I would give is really be transparent as possible. You can't prepare for everything. Probably need to make calls. If you have to make tough calls, make them quick, and don't dwell on them, and don't second guess yourself. I think we got a little bit guilty in that as well, and we should have made some decisions a lot faster than we probably did because they affected people. And that was probably one thing that when you're a family orientated business, sometimes you don't make some big calls because that becomes quite challenging. So I'd say make tough calls quickly, and also understand that it's total shit right now, but things improve, and time is a good healer of certain aspects.
So kind of touching on one of the points you made just then about them being concerned about you and Dan. So one of the silver linings over the last few years is seeing how people have come together in times of struggle. And we know something close to your heart is talking about the importance of mental health. So can you talk a little bit about your journey through the last few years and what advice you might have for others in the industry or just business owners in general who might also be struggling?
Yeah, I never really thought too much about mental health before COVID. I always call it BC, because I knew people. I wasn't a stigma. I didn't have an issue with it, but it was just I didn't really have any sort of significant challenges. But when this happened, I was really impacted by it, and I probably didn't see it coming, and it probably jumped up on me a little bit. And I think the real advice that I think one way that I kind of myself kind of got through it, well, a number of ways. The first thing was I decided I was going to be quite transparent about it and quite open about it. And I used social media, whether it was LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, as a tool to basically communicate what I was going through, and the fact that if I was going through this, other people were going through similar sort of things, and maybe that could help. But actually, for me, it was quite cathartic to be able to do that. Social media is a double-edged sword, in my opinion. On one hand, it's great that you can use this. You have a voice that you can go out, and it's good for you, and it potentially is good for other people. And the other thing, the worst part about it was it keeps giving. Social media, I don't know if those who are on the likes of Facebook and Instagram, it'll tell you, it'll say, oh, this is what you're doing 2 years ago, and show you a photo of you being in the Oktoberfest or doing a deal in the US somewhere or whatever. And it was kind of this constant reminder back in the day, oh, that's what it used to be like. Where I really struggled a little bit was during the middle of the night. I was never a good sleeper, never have been. I used to wake up and I could survive on 4 hours sleep, no problems, and I'd do work in the middle of the night. Probably, now that I think about it, probably pissed off a lot of our staff who probably felt guilty that I was working. But it was just the way that I worked. But I started finding myself waking up in the middle of the night and basically reminiscing. going, oh God, how did we not see this? Or
Mm.
remember when we were doing that? Or remember, and it was actually really, it was totally unhelpful. And it got to a point where I decided to go and see someone, probably the insistence of my wife. At the stage she was probably sleeping in another room. I was sleeping in this room because it was just so dysfunctional. Well, I was. So I went and saw someone, and I got to say it was the best thing that I ever did. It was someone who had no vested interest, who actually, to be fair, when I speaking about Jucy, they were like, oh, is that a juice company? I was like, God, I thought everyone in New Zealand knew our business, but she obviously didn't. But she was great, and she was just very matter of fact, and I kind of related to her. And then ultimately I ended up, taking some medication to help, which I never thought I'd ever be doing, but that was probably a great thing for me to do as well. And it got me through. So I think the advice that I would give to anyone who goes through, and you do go through challenging shit you go through, and people are going through it right now everywhere, is do whatever you need to do, talk to whoever you need to do, and take whatever you need to do to get through and survive. And then I ended up getting off the medication that I was on and doing things differently. But you do whatever you need to do to get through at the time. And that's what I kind of realized.
Mm. That's so important. And also just to reach out to people that you're not alone in this. So moving away from the business side of things, you mentioned to us that you're passionate about giving back, whether it's helping young entrepreneurs take those next steps, or more recently providing beds and bedding to Kiwi kids in need. Can you tell us a little bit more about these two ventures, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a bit of a passion for young business owners, young entrepreneurs in New Zealand. And I think because, again, my brother and I started our business when we were in our mid-20s, which was kind of even rare back then. And I think, but back then when we did start our business, we had no wives, no mortgages, kind of was never going to fail because we were so, we just had nothing to lose to a certain degree. And I think and we also had the enthusiasm of youth, I suppose. So we could work, 100 days in a row. It didn't make a difference at all. And I think a lot of that, and there's a real opportunity for young business entrepreneurs to really, they can bring a lot, especially with next generation marketing and social media and innovation. So I was always really passionate about seeing young New Zealanders, create their own businesses. So I think the other thing I loved about New Zealand, which is probably about very care orientated, is that no one is out of reach. So one thing about New Zealand, which I think is incredible, whether you're in New Zealand or whether you're in San Francisco or wherever you are, no one's out of reach. You can reach out to pretty much anyone in New Zealand and you'll end up eventually talking to them through someone and getting advice. So I was really passionate about that. So that's kind of why I've always sort of been very available to people who wanted to speak about their businesses or what they're doing. And when last year, when I walked away from, the year before, when I walked away from Jucy, I was in a pretty dark place, and I thought, like how can I get through this? And what I found really beneficial to me was to help a few friends out with a few businesses that they had. One mate had a tiny homes business that they wanted to expand, and another friend of mine, two friends of mine, they had a business which they'd set up in the middle of COVID called Comfy, and it was an online bed business. And they tried to buy beds for their teenage kids, and they were really struggling to buy them online. It was very confusing. The whole industry was really confusing, and buying a bed was just a nightmare. So they set up this online bed business called Comfy, and they said, oh, look, we'd really like you to help us see if we can scale this thing. And my skill set is really around building a brand and building a community and building a team around. So I got involved. I said, look, I'll get involved, but I'll only do it if there's a social component to it. And I think maybe call it my midlife crisis. I don't know. Maybe it was better than buying a Porsche or taking a second wife or something. I don't know. But it was much better for me to. And so I said, look, we'll get involved. And so they set up this business, and I'm now got involved in that. It's called Comfy, and it's an online bed business out of New Zealand here that sells, brilliant New Zealand-made proper beds online for about half the price of what you buy in traditional bed retailers. And for every 5 beds that are sold, we give a full sleep solution to a Kiwi kid. So, which we realised so many don't have beds and don't have pillows and don't have bases and all that. So yeah, so it's great. I'm really excited about it.
That's very cool. Hadn't heard of Comfy, but if people are interested, I'm sure we can add the link to the website.
Cool.
So moving back into tourism, and obviously, one of New Zealand's top export industries, you said to us that you believe that 2022 and beyond to help make this happen.
So I mean, I just you froze for a little bit there, and I just missed that part of it.
So sorry. So basically, what do you see in 2022 and beyond to help the tourism industry survive, revive, and thrive?
Yeah, I think it's I mean, tourism is such an important part. And I think we probably didn't realize the importance until you don't know what you got till it's gone scenario. And for us to be able to bounce back and recover, tourism will play a huge, massive role in that. I mean, you heard some people say, "Oh, we were too reliant on tourism. We needed to pivot," which is that horrific word that people keep throwing around, the idea around pivoting. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think for us, we probably needed to rethink tourism a little bit, and we've been able to do that a bit in terms of how we utilize our incredible assets that we have here. But in all honesty, I think what will happen is when people can return to New Zealand, and when they can return to New Zealand without the limitations around isolating or MIQ, I think we will see a huge increase and a huge bounce really quickly. There's a massive build-up of people globally who will see New Zealand as a massively attractive destination, and so I think we'll return. I think the biggest challenge we're going to have is basically a crisis, a crisis of quality, where I think the challenge, I believe, is that a lot of the tourism businesses aren't there. If you look at the backpacker industry, which we're still heavily involved in, and I'm running our Jucy snooze business here. We've got 2 properties in Auckland and 2 properties in New Zealand, and building one in Auckland at the moment. We believe that 50 to 60% of the market is gone. So gone as a result these operators and suppliers just aren't there. And then you've got other things like the bus industry or camper vans or whatever. No one's been able to invest in assets. A lot of the people that were involved in tourism aren't anymore. They've got out. So you have the doors will open, and they will eventually. And then what happens? You've got poor assets. You've got no staffing, qualified staffing. So I think that's the biggest challenge for this industry. I don't think demand will be an issue. Demand will be there and hugely. The biggest challenge will be: are we ready, and can we be ready to welcome that demand back, and not to lose what makes us quintessentially different from the rest of the world, and that's the experience that you get when you come down to this part of the world.
Yeah, we're seeing that definitely with Queenstown at the moment, aren't we? So how long do you think it's going to take us to recover, not only from the demand side, as you said, but in terms of the staffing requirements, kind of building back that industry of tourism operators and the staff that were so passionate about giving people that experience?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting period of time. I think we are a very seasonal business, so we between October, November, and April, it's when the high season over our summer, and so that's when we get the majority of our volume. Yes, we get good ski business out of Australia and stuff during the winter, but majority is so. You'd like to think come October this year, if the borders can open up, if there's no requirement for self-isolating, then the demand won't be an issue. We'll be a little bit reliant on airlines, but the general view out there is that the likes of New Zealand stuff they're just champing at the bit to get going and bring people back into New Zealand. So look, I'd say demand, as I said, won't be the issue. In terms of the infrastructure, we're a pretty resilient bunch, and I think people will be so excited to see people back in here, but it will be different. There will be less supply, there will be other assets in there. So, but again, there might not be opportunity for other people to say, you know what, actually, I'm going to get involved in this business at the bottom, because I think the only way is up, and I think there's an opportunity. But it's going to take some time. It won't be this season. It's going to take a couple of seasons just to get back to where we were from a quality perspective, from a staffing perspective. And the other thing with staffing, again, is the majority of our staff were foreigners, and they haven't been allowed back in the country. So that's another issue that we're going to face. And Queenstown is a perfect example right now that restaurants, bars, hotels aren't able to operate, not just because the volume is down, but because they simply can't staff it.
Yes. let's not get into the border challenges.
No.
So just to let everyone on the call know, on the event know, we do have some time for questions, so feel free to pop them into the Q&A or into the chat area as well. Have you learnt over the last few years, both as a CEO and as a father?
Sorry, Mel,
I cut out again, didn't I?
Cut out again. Yeah, you did. Yeah, and I'm just want to make sure I get the question right.
So what has the last few years through the pandemic, what has that taught you both as a CEO and father? So from the business perspective and the personal perspective, what are your lessons learned? Yeah,
I mean, I was always, for me, I missed out on a hell of a lot with my kids. I got 3 kids. The oldest is just 16, and the youngest is 12. And I missed out on a huge bit while we were growing Jucy. I was away for months on end. I missed every parent-teacher interview, every chapel service if there was one. I just missed a lot. And I, I don't regret it, but I definitely, as a result of what's gone on, I kind of look back at what was important to me. And it was really interesting when we went through, as a father, when everything went down, the shit at the fan, I walked away from stuff. I remember saying to my wife at the time, I said, shit, do we need to talk to the kids and just tell them, what's gone on, what's happened, that it will impacts on them. It impacts on what we can do. It changes things. And she said, no, we don't. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, they know, Tim. They're not stupid. They know. They can see what's going on. They can see what you've been going through. They can see everything. So I think for me, being upfront and being honest with them has been something that and actually being able to spend time with your kids and be a bit like your staff, just being brutally honest about the situation. And they will learn from it, as I have learned from it, as we as a couple have learned from it. So from a family perspective, I'm actually really enjoying being able to spend more time with them, being able to do more stuff than I've ever done with them. They might be sick of me by now, I don't know. But for me, it's been really, really important. The other thing I would say, though, is, I went down to Queenstown earlier this week just for 24 hours. And to be able to go down and see our crew down there was just incredible. So as much as it's great to have the Zooms and it's great to have, there is nothing like being there in person. So I don't want to lose that either. As a CEO, I think the big thing again is just, the ability to understand that things don't always go to plan. You cannot predict everything. You got to get the right people around you. You got to talk to the right people again, and shit will happen that you just got to deal with, and you got to front up and face it. And sometimes it's easy just to walk away or think that it won't happen or think that you won't have to deal with it, but you have to deal with it. And so that's kind of been the big thing for me. But also the other thing I would say is that we were really lucky just to have our teams were just incredible. What we're going through, they're losing their jobs, their lives are being thrown upside down. But if you have a strong culture within your business, and you have it's amazing how there was no negativity from their perspective. It was more like, shit, are you guys all right? And I think that's a big thing for me. Something I've really learned about. If you have a strong culture within your business, through good and through bad times, it's invaluable.
That's so true. I have a question here from the audience. Has your sleep improved now? Was it the bidding or reconciling the Jucy ordeal, or both?
Yeah, I mean, the bidding's definitely helped, I must say. It's my little plug for Comfy. But no, I think when I finally got my head around the fact that actually I can't control there's no point in dwelling on what's gone on. There's no point in looking back in the rear vision mirror, because as much as you can learn from stuff, and you should always learn from what's gone on in the past, I can't change anything. I can't do anything about it, right? As much as I might want to go change this or not do that or whatever, I just can't do it. And so for me, it's about going, I've got to look forward. And once I kind of got my head around that fact, my sleep definitely improved. Now, I still wake up in the middle of the night. I still do, I do that, but I'm not by no means where I was in the past. And I'm probably just more at peace with things to a certain degree. Look, there's no question, I still wake up at times or even sit there and go, how the hell, what just happened? How the hell did that happen? How do you, but again, I think the best way to get through it is to be thinking about just looking forward and going, okay, well, that's happened, park that. What's the next situation going to look like? What's the future going to look like? What can I do? And that's probably just don't look back. Or don't freeze now.
So I've got a couple of other questions here, so we'll just keep going.
Sure.
So has the pandemic changed the way you view the long-term viability of the tourism industry?
No, I don't think so. From a viability perspective, I think it will change. It will definitely change the way operators look at growth. It will change the way they look at expansion. And I'm a little bit nervous about that as well, because on one hand, I think it will. I mean, you're not going to, if you go out there now and go, I don't know, use a camper van company as an example. I've got demand for 100 camper vans. I'm going to build 100 camper vans. But hang on, whatever the demand goes, there's another pandemic, whatever, maybe I should build 50. And so there's that will happen. And I think that will be, on one hand, I think it's a positive. But on the other hand, I think it's a real risk, because we need entrepreneurs, we need people in this game who are prepared to take risk and to grow and to back the demand, back the opportunity. So I think it's going to be a double-edged sword. So I think the tourism industry will be fine long term. I think it's going to continue to be a huge export earner for New Zealand. It should be the biggest export earner for New Zealand. I just think there's going to be a period of time where people are just going to be a lot more reserved. I think funders are going to be a lot more reserved. I think there's just going to be a change in the way that people view, because in the back of our minds, there's always the possibility of another COVID. And before this, we never really thought about COVID. We had SARS, but that was something that was happening in Hong Kong. There was, there was just never, 9/11 was horrific, but we got through it. The one thing I would say about our industry, the other thing I would say is that we saw it after 9/11, we saw it after the GFC, is it bounces back really quickly. There is definitely a bounce back, and especially in the sector that we're in, which is more sort of the youth, low-cost travel, bounces back really quickly. So we're pretty excited about that at Jucy Snooze, especially.
So what can Kiwis do to support the industry? What should we be doing?
Oh, I think we really want to make sure that we are aggressively promoting and encouraging anyone who's offshore at the moment, is encouraging people to get back to New Zealand or come down to here when they can. I know there'll be a few frustrations around the borders, but when they can, that's really important. We need to be encouraging from a government perspective, whether it's more enticing more film into New Zealand, which will be a great sort of marketing tool for us. We also need to make sure we continue to invest in tourism. And look, I think you will get that, but you also get people who, as I said before, a little bit hesitant about things as well. So I think that, New Zealanders have been very good over the last 18, 20 months around traveling around New Zealand. So I think we've made the opportunity and made the most of that. But that's not going to survive. The tourism industry is not going to survive on that, right? We've got to get internationals back into this country and enjoying everything that we have to offer here. Yeah,
definitely. Just kind of looping back to the kind of young entrepreneurs lens, what would your advice or tips be for people who are kind of starting out on the journey, who have a great idea or have a passion for an industry or a platform or whatever it is? What would your advice be for them, as they launch their businesses?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is, as I sort of mentioned before, I talk to as many people as possible. Find the great operators in that market, or find and just talk to people, because again, I think New Zealand is unique. It totally is unique in the sense that there is people out there. There's lots of opportunities to get advice. I think that one of the challenges businesses have now, young people launching businesses now, is that they nearly go, there's so much data available now that we spend so much time pulling data together and building these business plans and we in a sense nearly forget a bit about the gut side of it as well. And I think it's really valuable. We got to have both sides of the equation together. So you don't want to lose that. And I think that's happening a little bit, which is a bit sad. So if you've got something which you think is a great product, is a great concept or whatever, speak to people, do the market research, but ultimately, if you can find a viable product, viable opportunity, go for it. And we really have to support young people investing in businesses, and also ensure that we're utilizing their skill set. I mean, I look at the likes of TikTok now and what that's doing for businesses globally from a marketing platform, and it's incredible. Now, my 12-year-old's amazing on TikTok. I just signed up to it this week, which will be very fascinating. But I'm getting her to do it, setting it all up for the Comfy business. We're using it now in the Jucy Snooze business because it's a marketing tool where our customers sit. So I think you got to use the skills available, and use the fact that they're marketing and working in a different world than what we did. I sound old.
I was going to say the same. TikTok is a very new platform for many Kiwi operators, I think. So just continuing on around future plans. So what does the future look like for Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about the future, which I would never have said 6-12 months ago. I'm really fortunate that I've been working with the event guys and rolling out Jucy Snooze, and that's a really exciting proposition for me, because it's such a unique offering, it's such a unique product, and ironically 50% of the market is gone, so the opportunity will be there as a result, as well, which is bittersweet, but it is what it is. And so we're really keen to roll that concept out across New Zealand and Australia, and we've got some opportunities there, which is great. I'm excited about having a diversity a little bit outside of tourism as well, and that's where the likes of the Bed Business Company has been very good for me, both mentally and just the ability to do something totally different, but know that you got skill sets which you can transfer across other sectors. I'm really excited about helping other businesses as well, if I can. And we've got a lot of scars. We've got a lot of good stuff. We've got a lot of scars. We've got a lot of successes. And so if I can add value to any other businesses, I'm more than happy to do so. So I'm really keen to do that as well. So look, I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about what New Zealand can do. I'm excited about what we can do. And I think also I'm just, I think there's going to be opportunities aplenty as a result of this pandemic.
And I think I've got a couple of last questions here. From Mitchell Pham, another one of our world-class New Zealanders. Is there an opportunity to reimagine our tourism industry altogether so that we provide higher end customer experience, earn higher margins, higher wages, using data and technology more strategically?
Yeah, I think there totally is. I think there is it's a hard one really, in terms of, like, right now we'd take any customers that wanted to come into the country, right? You'd take anyone who's keen to come in. But I think there is an opportunity to create a different type of offering. And actually we need to do that in certain areas. We need to protect. And a good example is Milford Sound, right? Where we had a cruise business. We had about 20% of the market down there. And it was totally undersold. You could basically get on a cruise for $45, $50. Anywhere else in the world, that product would be $150, $200. So the ability for us to actually get better value out of these iconic assets and iconic areas is huge, and we need to be doing that as well. I think we've got to be careful we don't just focus on one area though, and that's probably the other, I would say, is that people look at sometimes at the bottom end of the market, the area that we probably more played in, and they said, but they come here for 3 months. They go to different areas. They don't just stick around Queenstown. They go to Franz Josef. They go to Fox Glacier. They do all the stuff. So you got to look at all aspects and have plans for all different types of clientele. I think what's interesting now though is if you look at where the world's moving, there's a whole workations are becoming a big thing. Co-working, come and live in Auckland for 4 months, and then go to Byron Bay for 3 months, work and stay out of different locations. So being able to cater for these new innovations, which I think is going to be really important. So the new Jucy Snooze that we're building in Auckland here, which ironically will end up being the biggest property in the country of its type, will have co-living, we'll have co-working, we'll have this whole new experience, which prior to COVID would never have been there. So you've got to be able to adapt accordingly. So I think there's a good opportunity to rethink certain aspects of tourism in New Zealand, and that's kind of exciting, but it needs innovation and needs people thinking about And it needs to, again, don't reinvent the wheel. If someone's doing it really successfully overseas, let's adapt it accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. And so, like, following on from that, what can we be doing to ultimately draw less on natural resources or human capital and be more environmentally sustainable? I mean, that's obviously a big part of our original 100% Pure New Zealand campaigns. So yeah, what could we be doing around the sustainability aspect of things?
Yeah, it's an area which I'm also pretty passionate about. Before COVID, we launched sort of the first range of commercial fully EV camper vans, and the way we're building the product up here, we're building in a unique way, which is a lot more sustainable from terms of the products that we're using, New Zealand made products. But these are all stuff which is coming, actually all the data that we're getting is coming out of from global information, is that people want to eat locally, they want to see local products, they want to stay in places which have a real sustainable focus. So I think if there is opportunities for New Zealand businesses to better understand what they can do, tourism businesses in the space, then I think that's so education's a big part of it. But I actually think, I mean, if I look at I can only look at what we're doing, especially with the build up here in Cook Street. It's, we've got beehives going onto the roof there. We're doing our own, we're doing our own honey up there. We've got recycling water. We've got no plastic. We're doing all this sort of stuff, which, again, not token, but stuff that people actually. But we're doing it for two reasons. One is it's the right thing to do, as is looking after the the different treks and walks around New Zealand. It's the right thing to do. But secondly, it's commercially viable to do it because our customers especially want to support businesses which are seen to be doing the right thing. And we've got to really look after New Zealand's infrastructure and New Zealand's assets, because we don't want the situation which we had in the past where you go down to do whatever the walkers across down in Taupo there, and it's overcrowded and it's polluted, and you don't want that sort of stuff. Got to protect it.
And the final question, just to round things out, from Oliver Hawkley in Scotland. Do you think there are any silver linings for the tourism sector in New Zealand that will eventually surface from the pandemic?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for the tourism sector in its own right, silver linings, I think there will be more thought gone into how we promote and market New Zealand as a destination. I think, to my point before, I think there'll be more of a focus on good tourism, good sustainable tourism. I think that's going to come out of this as a direct result as well. I think, dare I say, you might find there's less competition to a certain degree, which isn't, I'm not suggesting it's a great thing that their businesses have gone, but there might be a better quality of offering in certain areas which come through. So I think there will be, there's obviously going to be a build up. There's going to be a sugar hit when people are able to come back in here. But long term, look, I think there will always be opportunities that come out of chaos, right, and crisis. And so I think hopefully people will see tourism as an opportunity to reinvest in again and innovate and bring new products and offerings to the table.
Thank you so much for taking the time today to share your stories and experiences. It's certainly been a roller coaster for you over the last couple of years. To everyone who's attended this morning, we hope you enjoyed the session as much as we did. Thank you for bearing with me with the technical difficulties. A recording of the session will be available later on our Kia website today, if you do want to hear or go through the content from today. We're going to continue to run the series each month, so if you have any suggestions or feedback, there's a short survey at the end of this session, so feel free to share your thoughts with us. So yeah, to everybody who attended, to Tim, thank you so much for today. Hope you have a great day, and haere rā.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers for the questions. Take care.